Somebody, help me.
Her pulse is weak. She's not breathing right. Someone call 911 right now!
Wait, store policy says we call security first, not—
I don't care what the policy says, she's dying!
That's the moment nobody in that store would ever forget. Not the collapse, not the sirens. What they'd remember was a cashier named Renata Boyd, refusing to wait for permission to save a life. Ferndale wasn't a big town. It had one real grocery chain, Merrow Grocers, a handful of diners, and a population that mostly knew each other's names. Renata had worked the morning shift at Merrow for 6 years, ringing up the same regulars, remembering how old Mrs. Kapoor liked her bread sliced, remembering which kids' parents were struggling that month and quietly rounding down the total when nobody was watching. She was 34, she had 2 kids at home, Jordan, 9, and Aaliyah, 6, and a rent payment that always seemed to arrive faster than her paycheck did. She'd started night classes for her associate's degree 2 years ago. She'd had to drop them 6 months in when Aaliyah got sick, and the medical bills ate through what little savings she had. Renata didn't complain about it, not out loud. She showed up every morning at 6 a.m., put on her Merrow polo, and did her job like it mattered, because to her it did. That morning had started like any other. Register 3, same rush of commuters grabbing coffee and granola bars. Same tired smile she gave every customer, whether they deserved it or not. Then the doors opened and everything changed. The old woman on the floor was Constance Ashcombe. Nobody in that store knew her name yet. All Renata knew was that a woman was turning grey in front of her, and every second mattered more than the last. "Ma'am, I need you to stay with me, okay? Look at me. What's your name?" Constance. "Okay, Constance. I've got you. Help is coming. Just keep looking at me." Her manager, a heavyset man named Denny, hovered uselessly a few feet away, phone in hand, unsure whether to call 911 or corporate first. Renata didn't wait for him to decide. She grabbed a customer's phone off the checkout belt. "Give me that, now." She dialed emergency services herself, barking out the address, the symptoms, everything the dispatcher needed, while her free hand kept 2 fingers steady on Constance's pulse. "Stay with me. You're not doing this today. Not on my watch." The ambulance arrived 9 minutes later. Renata rode with them to the curb, made sure the paramedics had everything they needed. And then, because her shift wasn't over, she walked back inside, tucked her hair back into place, and rang up the next customer like her hands weren't still shaking. Nobody applauded her. Nobody even said thank you. Denny muttered something about liability under his breath and disappeared into the back office. Renata didn't think about it twice. She'd done what anyone should have done. She went home that night, made dinner for Jordan and Aaliyah, helped with homework, and fell asleep still smelling like the store's antiseptic hand sanitizer. She had no idea that 4 days later, the life she thought she understood was going to be pulled out from under her feet. It started with a phone call from Marcus Whitlock, the regional operations manager. Marcus wasn't Renata's direct boss, but he oversaw 6 Merrow locations in the region, and he had a reputation. Quiet, calculated, the kind of man who smiled at meetings and made your life harder the moment you left the room. And 2 weeks before the incident with Constance, Renata had filed a formal complaint. Not about pay, about safety. The back stockroom had exposed wiring near a leak in the roof, and she'd watched a co-worker nearly get shocked reaching for a box. She'd written it up, sent it through the proper channels, and asked, politely, professionally, for someone to fix it before somebody got hurt. Marcus had read that complaint. He hadn't forgotten it. Men like him rarely forget the employees who make noise, even when the noise is justified. "Renata, can you come into the office for a minute?" She wiped her hands on her apron and walked back, expecting maybe a schedule change, a shift swap, something routine. "Have a seat." "What's going on?" "We did an audit on your register. There's a discrepancy. $43 unaccounted for over the last 2 weeks. That's impossible. I count my drawer every single night before I clock out. I've never been short a cent in 6 years." "The numbers don't lie, Renata." "Then somebody's lying about the numbers. Marcus, you know me, you know I wouldn't. I'm not here to debate it. Corporate policy is clear on discrepancies of this nature. Effective today, your employment with Merrow Grocers is terminated." The words didn't feel real. She heard them, but her brain refused to process them as anything other than a mistake. A misunderstanding that would sort itself out any moment. You're firing me? 4 days after I helped save a woman's life in your store, and you're firing me over $43 that I never touched. This isn't personal. It's extremely personal, Marcus. I have 2 kids. I have rent due in 11 days. You don't get to sit there and tell me this isn't personal. I'm sorry, my hands are tied. They weren't tied. They were the hands doing the tying. Renata walked out of that office in a fog, past co-workers who wouldn't meet her eyes, past the same register where she'd knelt on the floor days earlier fighting to keep a stranger alive. She untied her apron in the break room, folded it neatly out of habit even though none of it mattered anymore, and set it on the shelf like she might be back tomorrow. She wouldn't be. That night, she sat at her kitchen table long after the kids had gone to bed. Bills spread out in front of her like a losing hand of cards. Rent, electric. Aaliyah's follow-up doctor visit. Jordan needed new shoes for school. His toes had been pressing through the front of the old ones for weeks, and she'd been putting off buying new ones, telling herself next paycheck, next paycheck. There wouldn't be a next paycheck. Not from Merrow, anyway. She put her face in her hands and let herself cry, quietly, so the kids upstairs wouldn't hear. Not because she regretted saving Constance. She'd do it again in a heartbeat, no hesitation, no matter the cost. But it hurt. It hurt in a way she didn't have words for yet, that doing the right thing, the one moment she'd acted without thinking twice about herself, had somehow been the reason her whole world came crashing down 4 days later. She had no idea, sitting there in the dark kitchen with her coffee gone cold, that 200 miles away, a man named Theodore Ashcombe had just hung up the phone with his mother's hospital and was already asking one question that would change everything. Who was the woman who saved my mother's life? Theodore Ashcombe was not a man used to waiting. He ran a logistics empire that moved cargo across 4 continents, employed thousands of people, and had built a reputation for being calm in boardrooms where lesser men panicked. But sitting in a hospital hallway outside his mother's room, none of that mattered. He was just a son, terrified he might lose her. Mr. Ashcombe, your mother is stable. She's going to be okay. Thank God, thank you. Can I see her? Of course, she's been asking for you. Constance Ashcombe looked smaller in the hospital bed than Theodore had ever seen her, smaller, but alert, her eyes finding his the moment he walked in. Theodore, Mom, I got here as fast as I could. Are you in pain? What do you need? I need you to find her. Find who? The cashier, the young woman at the grocery store. She saved my life, Theodore. She didn't wait for anyone. She didn't wait for permission. She just acted. Okay, I'll find her, I promise. Her name is Renata. I heard the paramedics say it. Find her. Thank her properly. Promise me. I promise. Theodore didn't sleep much that night. Somewhere between fear for his mother and restless energy with nowhere to go, he found himself pulling up Merrow Grocer's corporate information on his phone at 2 a.m., scrolling through employee directories his assistant had managed to pull with a few calls. By morning, he had a name, Renata Boyd, Register 3. 6 years of employment. He drove to the Ferndale location himself. No entourage, no announcement, just a man in a plain jacket, walking through automatic doors that had nearly swallowed his mother's last breath 4 days earlier. Hi, I'm looking for an employee. Renata Boyd. The manager on duty, Denny, blinked at him like he'd asked for something impossible. Renata, she doesn't work here anymore. Since when? Couple days ago, corporate let her go. Let her go? Why? I don't really know the details. Something about a register discrepancy. You'd have to talk to Marcus Whitlock, our regional manager, if you want specifics. Theodore felt something shift in his chest. Not quite anger yet, but the early edges of it. Get him on the phone. Now, please. Marcus arrived within the hour, straightening his tie in the parking lot, before walking in with the practiced smile of a man who'd smoothed over 100 uncomfortable situations before. Mr. Ashcombe, what a pleasure. I heard about your mother. I hope she's recovering well. She is. No thanks to how you've treated the woman who saved her life. I'm sorry? Renata Boyd, fired 4 days after pulling my mother back from the edge of death. I want to know why. There was a documented cash discrepancy in her register. It's a straightforward policy matter, nothing personal. Nothing personal, that's interesting, because I've now heard that phrase twice in 24 hours, and both times it sounded like a lie. Marcus's smile faltered just slightly. I can assure you everything was handled according to protocol. I don't believe you. And I intend to find out exactly what happened to her. Theodore didn't need an address book or a private investigator to find Renata. Ferndale was small enough that 2 phone calls got him what he needed. He drove to a modest house on the edge of town, noticing the toys in the front yard. A bike missing a kickstand leaned against the porch railing. Renata answered the door still in sweatpants, hair pulled back, clearly exhausted, clearly not expecting a stranger in an expensive jacket standing on her porch. Can I help you? Miss Boyd, my name is Theodore Ashcombe. I believe you saved my mother's life 4 days ago. Renata's expression shifted from confusion to recognition to something like disbelief. Constance, she's your mother. She is. And she's alive because of you. How is she? Is she okay? She's stable, recovering. She made me promise to find you and thank you personally. You didn't have to come all this way for that. I did. But that's not the only reason I'm here. What do you mean? I went to the store this morning to thank you, and I learned you no longer work there. That you were fired 4 days after saving my mother's life. Renata's jaw tightened. She hadn't told anyone the full truth yet, not even her sister. Saying it out loud to a stranger on her porch felt strange, but something about his face, genuine concern, not pity, made her let her guard down. They said there was a cash discrepancy. $43. I've worked there 6 years and never been short a cent. I filed a safety complaint 2 weeks before all this happened. About exposed wiring in the stockroom. I think that's the real reason. That's what I suspected. You don't even know me. Why does this matter to you? Because my mother is alive, and the person responsible for that is standing in front of me with nothing to show for it but an eviction notice waiting to happen. That matters to me a great deal. Renata felt her eyes sting, and she hated that they did. I'm not asking for charity, Mr. Ashcombe. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering to find out the truth. There's a difference. Constance insisted on meeting Renata in person the following week, discharged from the hospital, but still moving slowly, leaning on a cane she hadn't needed a month earlier. Theodore brought Renata to the Ashcombe estate himself, watching the 2 women meet for the first time outside a hospital hallway. You're the one. You're Renata. Yes, ma'am. Come here. Let me look at you properly. Constance took both of Renata's hands in hers, studying her face like she was memorizing it. You didn't know me. You didn't know my name, or who my son was, or what any of it meant. You just saw a woman on the floor, and you acted. Anyone would have done the same thing. No, anyone wouldn't have. Most people freeze. Most people wait for someone else to take responsibility. You didn't wait for anyone. That's rare, Renata. That's rarer than you know. I appreciate that, but it doesn't change what happened after. It changes what happens next. I promise you that. Theodore, standing quietly by the window, watched the exchange and felt that early edge of anger sharpen into something more useful, resolve. Renata, I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Okay. Do you believe this was really about a cash register? Renata hesitated, choosing her words carefully, the way she'd learned to over 6 years of biting her tongue to keep a paycheck coming. No, I think Marcus Whitlock has wanted me gone since I filed that safety complaint. I think he found the first excuse he could and used it. That's what I think too. And I don't believe you're the only one this has happened to. What do you mean? I mean, I've spent the last 2 days making calls, quiet ones, and I've heard your name isn't the only one that's come up when people talk about Merrow employees who raised concerns and then mysteriously disappeared from the payroll. Renata felt something cold settle in her stomach. How many others? I don't know yet, but I intend to find out. And when I do, Marcus Whitlock is going to have a much bigger problem than one cashier who wouldn't stay quiet. For the first time since she'd walked out of that office 4 days ago, Renata felt something other than grief and fear. She felt the first flicker of hope. But hope, she would learn, was only the beginning. The truth waiting underneath Merrow grocers ran far deeper than any of them yet understood. And once it surfaced, there would be no smoothing it over, no quiet settlement, no version of events where Marcus Whitlock walked away clean. If this story has you hooked already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because what happens next is going to shock you. Theodore Ashcombe didn't do things halfway. Within 72 hours of that conversation on his mother's veranda, he'd assigned two of his most trusted people to quietly dig into Mero Grocer's regional employment records, not through corporate channels, not through Marcus Whitlock, through a private investigator named Corinne Delgado, someone Theodore had used before for due diligence on business acquisitions. What have you got for me, Corinne? More than I expected, honestly. I've pulled termination records from Whitlock's 6 stores going back 3 years. There's a pattern, Theodore. A clear one. Walk me through it. 14 employees terminated for documented policy violations within 4 to 6 weeks of filing internal complaints. Safety issues, wage disputes, harassment reports. Every single one of them was let go on a technicality, a cash discrepancy, an attendance infraction, a uniform violation, small stuff, convenient stuff. That's not a coincidence. No, it's a pattern. And I think I found someone willing to talk about it. Her name was Dana Iso. She'd worked at a different Mero location under Whitlock's region 2 years earlier, terminated after filing a complaint about unpaid overtime. She agreed to meet Theodore in person, choosing a quiet diner outside Ferndale where she wouldn't be recognized. I want to be careful here. I signed something when I left. A severance agreement. I don't know what I'm allowed to say. You're allowed to tell me the truth, Dinah. I'm not recording this. I'm not asking you to sign anything. I just want to understand what happened to you. I filed a complaint about unpaid overtime. 3 weeks later, they told me I'd violated the uniform policy, wearing the wrong colour shoes, if you can believe that, and terminated me on the spot. No warning, no write-up beforehand, just gone. Did you believe it was retaliation? I knew it was retaliation. Everyone at that store knew it. Nobody said anything because everyone was scared they'd be next. Would you be willing to say that on the record? Formally? Dana was quiet for a long moment, turning her coffee cup slowly on the table. Why does this matter to you? You're not even someone from the company. Because my mother almost died in one of those stores, and the woman who saved her was fired using the exact same playbook you just described. I don't intend to let that stand. If I do this and it doesn't work, I could lose everything. A new job, a new apartment. I've rebuilt a life since I left, Mr. Ashcombe. I understand that fear completely, but I promise you this, I have the resources and now the reason to make sure this doesn't just disappear quietly. If you help me, I'll make sure you're protected. Dana looked at him for a long moment, weighing 6 years of silence against the weight of finally being believed. Okay, I'll talk. On the record. With Dana's statement in hand, along with Corinne's pattern of terminations, Theodore requested a meeting with Mero Grocer's corporate leadership, specifically the regional vice president Marcus Whitlock answered to, a man named Preston Calloway. Mr. Ashcombe, thank you for coming in. I understand there's some concern about how one of our terminations was handled. Some concern is an understatement, Mr. Calloway. I have documentation showing a pattern of retaliatory terminations across 6 stores under Marcus Whitlock's supervision, spanning at least 3 years. 14 employees, all let go within weeks of raising internal complaints. That's a serious allegation. It's a documented one. I have termination records, I have a witness on record, and I have the woman who saved my mother's life, fired 4 days later, over a cash discrepancy that never existed. Preston's expression shifted from polite concern to genuine alarm. I wasn't aware of the scope of this. I'll need to see everything you have. You'll see all of it. And I want to be very clear about something, Mr. Calloway. I'm not just a customer with a complaint. My company has a supply chain partnership with 3 of your regional distributors. I have influence in rooms that matter to Mero's bottom line, and I intend to use every bit of it if this isn't handled properly. I understand. Do you? Because what I need from you isn't an apology. I need an internal investigation, full reinstatement and back pay for every employee wrongfully terminated, and Marcus Whitlock removed from any position of authority over people's livelihoods. Marcus Whitlock, when called into Calloway's office that same afternoon, had no idea what was waiting for him. Marcus, we need to talk about the terminations under your supervision over the past 3 years. I'm not sure I follow. 14 employees, Marcus. All terminated shortly after filing internal complaints, all on minor technical violations, including Renata Boyd, 4 days after she saved a customer's life in one of our stores. Marcus's composure cracked for the first time, the practiced smile disappearing entirely. Those terminations were all within company policy. Were they? Because I have a former employee on record stating she was fired for wearing the wrong coloured shoes 3 weeks after complaining about unpaid overtime. People misremember things, people get angry when they're let go and they look for someone to blame. And Renata Boyd? Was she misremembering the $43 discrepancy that appeared in her register the same week she filed a safety complaint about exposed wiring? Marcus said nothing. Marcus, I'm going to ask you one time directly. Did you fabricate cause for termination against Renata Boyd in retaliation for her safety complaint? I don't have to answer that. You do, actually, because Theodore Ashcombe has already brought this to my attention. And if I don't have answers today, this becomes a legal matter tomorrow, and I promise you, the company will not be protecting you when that happens. Marcus sat back in his chair, the silence stretching long enough that it became its own answer. She filed that complaint 2 weeks before the incident with the elderly woman. I'd already flagged her file. When the corporate audit came through with a routine variance in her register, I used it, I'll admit that much. You manufactured a pretext to fire a woman who saved a customer's life because she'd previously reported a safety hazard that made you look bad. It wasn't just her. There were budget targets, turnover metrics. I was under pressure too. That's not an excuse, Marcus. That's a confession. Ward moved fast once Callaway launched a full internal investigation. Dana Iso's statement, combined with a dozen more former employees who came forward once they learned they weren't alone, painted a picture that was impossible to explain away as isolated incidents. Renata found out about the investigation from Theodore himself, sitting across from her in her kitchen, the same table where she'd cried alone just 2 weeks earlier. They're opening a full investigation into Marcus's terminations. 14 employees, all retaliatory, all connected to complaints about safety, wages, or harassment. 14, that's so many people. It is. And you were the one who exposed it, Renata. Not intentionally, but because Marcus fired you at exactly the wrong moment, in exactly the wrong way, in front of exactly the wrong family. I didn't do anything except try to keep my job. You did something much bigger than that. You just didn't know it yet. Renata sat with that for a long moment, thinking about Dana Iso and 13 other names she'd never met. All of them fired for the same reason she had been, for caring enough to speak up. What happens to Marcus now? That depends on what Callaway decides, but I don't think Marcus Whitlock has a future at Merrow Grocers. Not after this. And me? What happens to me? Theodore looked at her, and for the first time since he'd shown up on her porch, he allowed himself something close to a smile. That's actually why I'm here. Callaway wants to meet with you personally, and I have a feeling what he offers you is going to be a lot more than your old job back. So we're getting close to the ending now. If you don't want to miss how this all plays out, smash that like button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Renata Boyd sat in the waiting room of Merrow Grocers regional headquarters, wearing her one good blazer bought years earlier for Jordan's kindergarten graduation. Preston Callaway welcomed her in. Miss Boyd, thank you for coming in. Please, sit. Thank you for having me. I want to start by saying I'm sorry. Genuinely sorry. What happened to you was wrong, and it should never have happened under my watch. I appreciate you saying that, but an apology doesn't pay rent, Mr. Callaway. You're right, it doesn't. So let me tell you what we're prepared to do instead. Preston slid a folder across the table. Effective immediately, Marcus Whitlock has been terminated from Merrow Grocers, and the company is pursuing legal review of every improper termination under his supervision. 14 former employees, including you, are being offered full reinstatement with back pay or a negotiated settlement if reinstatement isn't what you want. That's a lot more than I expected. There's more. We're launching an internal employee advocacy division, a direct line for safety, wage, and harassment complaints that bypasses regional management entirely and reports straight to corporate oversight. We want you to run it. Me? I'm a cashier, Mr. Callaway. I don't have HR experience. I don't have a degree. You have something most people in HR never develop. Instinct. You saw a woman on the floor and you didn't wait for permission to help her. That's exactly the instinct this company needs at the head of a division built to protect employees who are too scared to speak up. I had to drop out of my associate's program 2 years ago. I never finished. We'll cover full tuition for you to finish that degree. on whatever timeline works for your family. Full salary during the transition. And Renata, this isn't charity. This is us recognizing that you're exactly the person for this job. Renata sat with the folder in her hands, feeling something she hadn't felt in weeks. Not relief exactly, but something steadier, something like the ground finally holding still beneath her feet. I want to think about it. Is that okay? Take all the time you need. She didn't need long. That night, after the kids were asleep, she sat at the same kitchen table, but this time the folder in front of her held something different than Bill's. It held a future. She called Theodora first. I wanted you to know before anyone else. I'm taking the job. I'm not surprised. I think you were built for it. I keep thinking about Dana, about the other 13 people. None of this happens without them coming forward. None of it happens without you either. You're the reason any of them felt safe enough to speak up at all. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you really do all this? You could have just written a check, thanked me, given me some money, and moved on with your life. Theodore was quiet for a moment before answering, because my mother taught me that gratitude without action is just a nice feeling that fades. She didn't want me to feel grateful, Renata. She wanted me to make sure what happened to you could never happen to anyone else. That's not charity. That's just doing what should have been done in the first place. 3 weeks later, Constance Ashcombe insisted on visiting Renata's home personally. No hospital gown, no cane this time, dressed like she was attending church. I wanted to see where you live, where your children grow up. It's not much, but it's ours. It's more than enough. Renata, I want you to know something, and I want you to really hear it. I keep telling everyone I was just doing. Most people freeze. You didn't. And because you didn't, 13 other families are getting their lives back too. Jordan came bounding down the stairs at that moment, new shoes on his feet, the ones Renata had finally been able to buy the week before, without checking the balance in her account 3 times first. Mom, can Alia and I go to the park? Sure, baby, be back before dinner. Constance watched him go, then turned back to Renata with something soft in her expression. Look at that, just a boy going to the park. No idea how close he came to growing up without a mother who could afford new shoes for him. He has no idea what almost happened to us. Maybe someday you'll tell him. Maybe someday you'll tell him his mother is the reason an old woman lived to see her son married, to hold grandchildren, to keep breathing every single day. And maybe you'll tell him that when she lost everything for doing the right thing came back around to find her. 6 months later, Renata sat behind a different kind of desk, not a cash register, but an office, with her name on the door. Director of Employee Advocacy, Merrow Grocers Corporate. On her wall hung her associate's degree. Finally completed, framed beside a photo of her and Constance the day the employee advocacy line officially launched company-wide. Dana Iso worked 2 doors down, hired as the division's first case coordinator. 11 of the other 13 wrongfully terminated employees had accepted reinstatement or settlements. Marcus Whitlock's name had become a cautionary tale, whispered in break rooms across the region, proof that retaliation didn't stay buried forever. Renata still remembered every detail of that morning at Register 3, the sound of Constance hitting the floor, the fear in her own chest as she pressed 2 fingers to a stranger's pulse, refusing to wait for anyone's permission to act. She hadn't known, in that moment, that saving a stranger's life would cost her everything she'd built for 6 years. She hadn't known that losing everything would become the very thing that gave her a life she'd never imagined possible. But maybe that was the lesson underneath all of it. Doing the right thing doesn't always pay off immediately. Sometimes it costs you first, sometimes it costs you everything you thought you had. But integrity has a way of finding its way back around, even when it takes the long way to get there. Renata Boyd didn't set out to change 14 lives that morning. She just saw a woman on the floor and she acted. Everything else was simply the truth, finally catching up to where it always belonged. If this story moved you even a little, don't scroll away just yet. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story like this one. Drop a comment below and tell me which moment hit you the hardest. Was it the firing, the confrontation with Marcus, or Constance showing up at Renata's door? And if you believe people like Renata deserve to have their stories told, smash that like button right now, because it helps this story reach the people who need to hear it most. Thank you for watching until the very end. We'll see you in the next one.